Hello, I wanted to make this video to sort of create a place for people to just have discussions, open-minded, with the goal of figuring it out. So there's really no room for judgment here. If you do come into this with a judgmental mentality, don't expect anyone to pay attention to you or engage with you. I encourage you, if you see anyone being judgmental, to just ignore them. They're not worth engaging with. This is meant to be productive, and there is nothing less productive than engaging in an argument with someone whose only goal is to just bring your character down and make you feel bad about yourself. That's not helpful. That doesn't get us anywhere. Even if someone is behaving in a way that is destructive, um, or harmful in some way, immoral, you're not going to help them or anyone else for that matter, and certainly not yourself, by judging them. And I could do a whole separate video on judgment, but that's not what this is. This is just a place where you can feel free of judgment, mainly in the comment section, but just for the purpose of the video, I want to talk about some things that have been on my mind this past week and just sort of share it. I don't really have a structure or a plan for this, but I just want to share some things that have been on my mind. So I'm going to start with what inspired this video, which was a video that I stumbled across of, I think it was Dr. Phil, and I don't know anybody else's, I don't know anybody else's name who was on this episode, but I just stumbled across this little clip on Instagram, and it was a father. I've never seen someone so broken up. I mean, he was sobbing. He was like, he really was, he looked like he had just, found out that someone he loved had died. I mean, it was like he was broken. And it was because he was seeing his transgender daughter for the first time since, I guess, coming out. And his daughter is just sitting there looking at him, and you could tell that both people were uncomfortable. I can't speak for Dr. Phil or the audience, but the father and daughter were uncomfortable, because as soon as he saw her, he just started sobbing uncontrollably. And I looked in the comment section of that video, and it was filled with nothing but transphobia. And then I went on and I found it on YouTube, and again, I searched high and low. I couldn't find a single nice comment. I was looking and looking and scrolling, and it was just all negativity. Everyone was just saying that they felt bad for the father, which I understand because he was clearly very broken up by this, but no one was having any sympathy for his kid, which, there's a reason for this. So I wanna just focus on this for a minute and just break this down, because I think people don't take the time to look at both sides of things, and clearly there are two sides to look at here. It's not good to just say, oh, that person's bad and you shouldn't do that. So, okay, assuming that you maybe don't have a stance regarding the issue of being trans, or maybe you do have a stance and you already think that you might not agree with me, just bear with me. Because this isn't really me trying to educate you or tell you how to think or what to feel, tell you what's right or wrong. We're just going on a little thought experiment and trying to figure it out. And I'm hoping that this will help to figure it out a little bit more, to share some of my thoughts. So I really mean it when I say there's no judgment. I'm not judging you as the viewer. You don't have to get defensive in the comment section. So I think with this guy sobbing, clearly what he was experiencing was the feeling that he had, like, failed as a parent. He felt like something was lost. And it looked like he was grieving a death, because in his mind, that's what had happened. He felt like his son had just completely gone from him. Now think of some other examples that you might relate to where this could have happened. Let's say that you give birth, or, your wife gives birth or whatever, and you wait maybe 20 years. All of a sudden, you find out that your son is, I don't know, Jeffrey Dahmer or something. Like, you know what I mean? Or that your son has done some horrible, unspeakable act that everyone would agree is horrible. you would be crying because even though your kid is still alive, you don't recognize them anymore. You feel like there is some type of severe darkness or mental illness that has just taken a hold of them and drained them of any light that they might have had. And that beautiful, hopeful child that you once saw when you brought them into the world is just gone now. That would break your heart. That would make you sob. And it makes me sad to think that that's how this man sees trans people, because I know a lot of trans people personally, and I can confirm they're just people. They're not murderers, they're not serial killers, and they are definitely not consumed by darkness. If you just, you know, pause and give them the benefit of the doubt, you'll see that they're just a person who, just like you, is trying to do their best and figure it out. And not everyone knows exactly what is set before them. I think when we're born, we can we have options, you know, right? Like we see we could go down this path and do this with our lives, but oftentimes there's this pressure from family, society, whatever, to do a certain thing. And some people just do that without question. Some people kind of drone on in kind of a meandering way. They don't really pay attention. They're just sort of like, all right, I go to work, I do this, I gotta pay the bills. And these people become very depressed because they're not really living, they're just sort of passively getting by in life. We all know this type of person. They're everywhere. They're just like, I call them like floaters, right? They're just kind of floating around with no real ambition or goal. They don't see an end to their cycles. They just kind of go on in a cycle. And that is pretty sad and depressing. Um, but then there's people who take the time to stop and question things, and we shouldn't judge them to how far they question things, because I think it's good to question everything. If you see people not really living and they're just, it almost looks like they're, you know, just in a little delusion, in a little bubble, trying to hide from reality, because what are we really hiding from if not pain? You know, there's all sorts of pain that we're trying to not have to face. Traumatic experiences, painful truths, like maybe you're in a relationship that you know is dead, but you don't want to admit it. Maybe you're at a job that you know is no longer serving you in any way, but you're just too afraid to leave because you don't know what would be next. You're afraid that you won't find something better. And the same logic with the relationship. You're afraid you won't find something better. Maybe you have kids and you're afraid it'll mess up. Like, you come up with all sorts of excuses to avoid facing the situation that you're in and dealing with the pain that comes with that situation. But you're never going to get on the other side of that pain if you don't go through it. You're just going to constantly be feeling it and trying to push it down, but it's still there. And I can understand how someone would see someone living that way and be terrified of ending up that way themselves. So then they go down a path, questioning things, saying, maybe I don't have to do this. Maybe I can get a better job or a better relationship. So then they make changes. Sometimes in questioning what you can and can't do in a relationship, you might end up in a relationship with someone of the same sex, and you're just seeing how that feels, and you might find that that actually feels a lot better. Sometimes you might question, you know, what job works out, and you realize that there are some jobs that really only exist to just serve rich people who are only interested in taking advantage of people. And it's not a job that actually benefits society in any way. Your heart's not in it. It would just be for the paycheck. In that case, you would want to only do that if you really need a paycheck, but it wouldn't be like somewhere you'd want to end up. Um, these are the things that a lot of people don't put a ton of thought into, but the ones that do are a lot more interested, I've noticed, in like actually going somewhere and growing. They become known. You know, a lot of these people turn out to be artists, actors, not necessarily actors so much, but sometimes. But a lot of them are creative. And that's really what it comes from, is because they're more tapped into the right side of their brain, the creative side of their brain. So they become creative in all sorts of areas. I see someone who's queer, part of the LGBT community. All I see is someone who's creative, someone who's not afraid to question the narrative. I don't see someone who's battling a mental illness. Now, granted, there are all sorts of mental illnesses, and I'm sure a lot of queer people have, you know, various mental conditions, although I wouldn't call it an illness. What I would call mental illness is what I see in the floaters, the people who are just not even paying attention to what's going on with them. they've completely been lost in a delusion. And what makes it an illness is how dark they go, what they're willing to do to preserve that delusion. They will go to all sorts of lengths. They will do completely immoral things to preserve that delusion. I just saw a video on Instagram last night. I think it was last night. I have a loose grasp of time at this point. That's neither here nor there. The video was, it was people, I think it was Mormons at a college campus or something. I'm pretty sure they were Mormons. I saw someone say that, but don't take my word for it. Do your own research. But this video, I think the questions that were being asked, someone was interviewing them and saying, would you rather have a sip of alcohol or kill a baby animal, or like a baby cat or dog or something? It might have been a specific animal, but a lot of them were saying that they'd rather kill a baby animal than have a sip of alcohol. You know, and there were some other questions in that same general category. And what that tells me is that this is really how dangerous it is to get sucked into any kind of cult-like thinking, where you sort of have this thing that you're clinging on to and you're afraid to cling away from it, because it should just be innate, you know, in all of us, that killing an animal is not okay, right? I would think that if we're actually listening to ourselves and not any outside source, we're really trusting what's in there in your heart, you would know you should not kill an animal. And if drinking just a little bit of alcohol meant saving an animal, you would do it. And yet there are people who are so caught up in their beliefs, what's been shown to them from outside sources, and what they've decided is the absolute truth. They will go to extreme lengths to preserve that belief. And that's what a belief is. It's something that you're trying to preserve. It's a version of reality that you've decided is objectively true, and anything that suggests otherwise is a threat. So you will go to whatever lengths necessary to preserve that belief, even if it means killing a cat. And I wish I was making that up, but this is literally what these people said. Um, so anyway, I just I was just shocked when I saw that, but at the same time, I was like, well, I don't know what else I would have expected at this point from people. Um, People are pretty predictable, honestly, um, which is the sad part, but that's what I would call mental illness, is when you're willing to go dark, do something that I think most people can just intuitively agree is just wrong, because you're afraid of other options. You're afraid of maybe the way you've been perceiving things is not quite the way things actually are. We can't be afraid to question things, and yeah, it's okay to cry when you don't understand something. Like in the Dr. Phil case, that dad that was crying, it's okay to feel that emotion, but think about how your kid might feel watching you cry just because they're trying to figure out who they are, and they've made a decision. They may change their mind again in the future, but this is who they want to be seen as right now. And instead of saying, that's okay, you're still my kid, you sob like they're dead to you. Imagine how hurtful that must be. I mean, there there's there was only empathy for the father in the comments, and people were talking about the transgender daughter as if she was not even human, as if she was just some some disgusting thing. Now, why is this? That's because the idea of being transgender poses a threat to these people's perceptions of reality. They have a belief system, they have an idea of what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, what is and what isn't. And when anyone tries to challenge that, it is a threat. So they will go to extreme lengths and do very inhumane, disgusting things like murder, bullying, just beating someone up, you know, because they're different. This has been going on for a very long time. People have always done shit like this. It's nothing new, but it is a shame, because I think, you know, we really, if we pay attention in history, we should realize that the people who are different are the ones who made the biggest differences in the world and helped us to evolve. Otherwise, we would just be stagnant. We'd stay the same. Our culture, our evolution would just be the same forever. We'd never go anywhere. And the reason that that's not a good thing is because we are generally not very happy. We don't really feel like we're getting that much done. And most of us who get stuck in these cycles end up like floaters, which doesn't feel good. It also doesn't contribute anything good. It's just it's just sort of like you're passively existing and you might as well not even exist. Um, so it's really it's a lot of cultures in history have done this. I think my grandpa mentioned that Egypt was the same for like a ridiculously long time. Um, and the theory is that it's because of religion. I think religion stagnates people. I think that the culture stayed the same for so long because that's just, you weren't really allowed to question anything. And in cultures like, I don't know, I mean, we pretty much have a worldwide culture now. I feel like with the internet, everyone is so connected. Um, there are very few countries where we aren't exposed to just worldwide culture nowadays, but I feel like the US is pretty influential Western culture. And in Western culture, it's becoming a little bit more praised to be queer or different in some way. But even still, there's the backlash. Now, I could do a whole separate video on why I think this is. It's a separate issue. But I've still seen people who say that they're from countries where it's like laughed at. It's like, oh, we don't do any of that LGBT stuff here. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't mean you don't have people that would be if they felt like they were free to. They're just hiding it because they think they have to, which is a sad existence. Have you ever felt like you had to pretend you were someone you weren't? You know how horrible that feels? You really, you just dive into a little shell and it's like you just invert. It's very sad. And it's good to see people coming out of that shell, but I want to address some of the criticism that I've seen. A lot of people are calling it narcissism. They're thinking of these people who are freely um, questioning things and trying to find different ways to express themselves, calling them self-indulgent, narcissistic, um, just like Gen Z type mentality of just overindulgent in your own ideas and not really likable. A lot of I've seen some depiction in movies lately that makes Gen Z come off as very annoying and judgmental and weird, and I feel like it's it's not completely inaccurate. I mean, there are definitely some very narcissistic people out there, and I won't deny reality. I've seen it. There are absolutely um, some very self obsessed people who do not actually have their heart in the right place. A perfect example of this is the majority of vegans. I think a vegan, not all vegans, but most vegans, unfortunately, I think are these types of people who think that they're doing so much, but if they actually found out um, how much of an impact they're making regarding climate change or just generally making the world a better place, they would be surprised by how little of an impact they're actually making. I mean, it's probably next to nothing because there aren't enough of them. Maybe if there were enough, maybe. But even then, there's still other issues we need to deal with. Veganism is not the solution because it is not the root of the problem. Um, but that is a perfect example of how these people think that they're doing a lot more than they're doing. And it's more about being a better person than actually doing something because it's the right thing to do. And the sad thing is that a lot of the people who actually do have their hearts in the right place, you don't hear from them that much. They're not bragging about it. So you don't even know that they exist, but they do. You only hear from the ones who are very loud, and those are the ones who probably don't have their heart in the right place. So just keep that in mind. And also, for those of you who are tired of hearing transphobic, homophobic, negative comments, just know that they are not the majority. They are just the loudest. Um, the truth is that a lot more people are queer than we realize. I think as we expand the definition of queer, it just really means embracing being different. So you don't even have to be um, gay or trans or bi. You could just be, I don't know, maybe open to just being whatever, you know, just shed the the box that you sort of fit into and just be you, the unique you, you know? You don't have to say, "Oh, I fall into this category. I'm like other men or I'm like other women or I'm like other white people or other black people or Asian people. I'm like other trans people." Whatever it is. Um you can just be you and whatever that means for you. And that to me is enough to make you part of the queer community because that's all it really means. It's just different. It's queer literally means weird. And to break free from a box that someone is trying to fit you into is true freedom and liberation. And it's ironic that in a country, the United States of America, that is talking so much about freedom and liberty, there is this weird self-destructive mentality that is ironically against liberty, trying to make people fit into categories. It doesn't make any sense. There's this idea that we have to be a certain way in order to raise kids, in order for families to turn out well. You have to do it a certain way, right? You have to have a mother and a father. It can't be a single mother or a single father. It can't be two moms, two dads. You can't confuse the kids with any of that. There's all this stuff. None of this is based on scientific research. Maybe some of it is, but it doesn't, you're drawing the wrong conclusions from it. If you did actual scientific research, you would see that all a kid really needs is to feel safe, loved, protected, and to know that they don't have to wonder if they're going to be left to take care of themselves um, until they want to, until they're ready to go off on their own. And that's really all you need. Now, there's a little more to it than that, sure. But I guarantee you, it is possible to raise a kid by yourself. You don't need a partner. And if you do have a partner, it doesn't have to be the opposite sex. Okay? Just chill out with that. It's not, anyone who's convinced you otherwise does not know what they're talking about. If you think you do know what you're talking about, think about the repercussions of the stance that you've chosen to take. All the people who have been raised by families like that, all the people who maybe have no choice but to raise a family like that, what are you trying to suggest? Are you trying to make them feel like shit? Like they're messing their kid up beyond repair? I don't understand what your goal is. So just consider that it might not be that black and white. I have seen proof that families can turn out just fine, even if they're different. So I don't know what research there could possibly be to suggest otherwise when I've seen firsthand proof. But anyway, I know that people have beliefs like that, but the truth is that it's okay to be different. I lost my point. I was saying something else before I started talking about that, but whatever. Ultimately, all I really want to say is that if you don't know who you are or what category you fall into, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. Another thing that people get upset about is pronouns, and I want to say it's the same thing. Don't overthink it. It really is not that deep. People have been going absolutely haywire with the pronoun thing. People don't even seem to understand what the word pronoun means. Like, we is a pronoun, I is a pronoun, he, she. Like, you you can't just not have pronouns. That's not realistic. And when someone tells you how they would like to be referred to and you go out of your way to do it wrong, why are you being an asshole? I mean, really, I don't know how else to put it. You shouldn't go out of your way to do something that you know someone doesn't want you to do, just because you think you know more about who they are than they do. Do you not see how that's insulting and condescending? You know, I shouldn't have to explain this to full-grown adults, but um, it just, apparently I do. It's a shame, but anyway, I just want this video to give people a chance to just have discussions in the comments and just feel like it's okay to just question things and not feel like they're just going to be attacked and judged. No one deserves to be attacked. There's no justification for it. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm sure there's a lot more I could have said, but yeah, just a little bit of like a stream of consciousness, just sharing what's on my head, in my head. Have a good rest of your day or night, and I'll see you next week on my other channel or in 2 weeks on this channel. I post videos on Fridays at 4 p.m. My other channel will be in the description. I'll put a link to it. Thank you for watching.